Okay, so in this week's guitar lesson, we're going to continue with this little mini series that I started several weeks ago on playing the blues out of each of the shapes from the C.A.G.E.D system. And I'll put those lessons up on the screen. So we've covered all 5 shapes now. And what we've done in that is we start with one of the shapes. So you start with the A shape, for example, and that becomes your 1 chord. And in that area, in that little 4-fret region of the fretboard, you find the 4 chord, you find its 5 chord, and then you find the major and minor pentatonic scale. And you limit yourself to like 4 frets. You don't go outside of the bounds, but you play an entire blues out of that region. And we've done that for all 5 shapes now. And so what we're going to do in this lesson is we're going to spill across the fretboard this way. We're going to take the guardrails off, basically, and start looking at how it kind of all connects across the fretboard. That's really more of a realistic way of how you would play the blues. I do think it's incredibly important, though, if you haven't watched the other videos, just to understand how those chords relate to each other. When I learned that, that's how I learned the fretboard, was understanding, okay, if I'm going to start with my G shape, I can find where my 4 chord is in relation to that, my 5 chord, pentatonics, all of that stuff. It's a really good way to visually understand the fretboard. So in this video, we're going to go through the first half of a blues. I've got a 2-part little blues thing where we go through the cycle 2 times. In this video, we'll go through the first half. If you'd like to watch the second half, download the tablature, download the MP3 jam track, all the materials that you can use to practice everything we're going to talk through. You can get all those materials by going to activemelody.com and doing a search for EP631. Okay, so let's start off. Let me just give you a little precursor of what's to come next week. I don't usually ever do this, but it relates to what we're going to talk about. I'll just give you a little sample of it. But what we're going to do, we're going to play a blues in the key of C. And so if I'm playing in the key of C, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my C. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is find my C note. So I'm going to start with, we'll just start with this C note here on the 3rd fret, 5th string. Now from here, I have some options. If I put my index finger and play that note, I can make a chord shape here. That's my A shape. Index finger is on the C note there. My pinky, or your ring finger, depending on how you make that chord, is up here on the 5th fret. Now inside of this shape, I have 2 C notes. I have one here, and then I have one up here. So check this out. This is the cool part. This is what's going to be in next week's lesson. So where my pinky is, I'm going to replace my pinky with my index finger, and I'm going to do this across the board. So check this out. Put my index finger down now. I'm going to do a little bar on that 5th fret. Pinky now goes down on the 8th fret, 1st string. Now I'm playing the G shape. So this was my A shape. This is my G shape. So I've got a C note there and a C note up here with my pinky. I'm going to replace my pinky with my index finger again. Now I'm going to bar. I'm going to make the E shape. So we went A, G, E. Where my pinky is on this 10th fret, 4th string, I'm going to replace that with my index finger. I'm going to make the next shape up, which would be the D shape. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm spelling A, G, E, D, and then it goes C. And so that's how the C.A.G.E.D system works. You don't always have to start with C. I mean, you can start with any of those chords, but they do follow that order. And so I'll go into more detail about that in a future lesson, probably next week, and give you some practice material to go with that, just to help you really understand it that way. But I wanted to start with that because it kind of relates to what we're going to do for this week. So we're going to do a blues in the key of C, and I'm going to start here out of this A shape. So it looks like that. Now inside of this, and I covered this in this lesson, I'll put this lesson up on the screen. That's where we go into detail about that A shape. But I showed you that you have a flat 7 in there. So if I want to play a C7 in this shape, it looks like this, right? And these are slidable chords. And so I love that because there's no open string, so you can go like this. There's another one up here. And this is actually, you could argue that this would be in the A shape because that part's in the A shape, this little triad here. But it's also part of your G shape next door. So this is kind of a hybrid between those two. So for now, I'll just say that this C7 is in our G shape. So look at this. We've got our C chord using the A shape. Here's our C7 using the A shape. And here's a C7 using the G shape. And here's our C using the G shape. And with that, we've got our bearings for how I want to start this blues. So we're going to put on the jam track. I want you to hear what we do. But basically, just pay attention to this. I'm going to slide into this first C7, just starting a half step down. And then I'm going to slide into this C7. and cap it off with my pinky up here on this C note up on the 8th fret 1st string. Check this out. All right, so now you understand how we're starting this blues with a C7 out of the A shape and a C7 out of the G shape. Now check out this next move. I go. Now that is the C major pentatonic scale, and I want to give you a little formula here. I talked about this in a lesson a few weeks ago, a blues phrasing formula. I'll put that lesson up on the screen. There's a lot of past references in this video, but basically here's the gist of the formula. And this is one that is commonly used. It's not one you have to use. There's a million ways you can play the blues, but here's the formula. When you're playing a blues, like in the key of C like this, for the 1 chord, you can play the C major pentatonic scale. When the song goes to the 4 chord, which would be an F, you can play the C minor pentatonic scale. So it's the key of the song, minor pentatonic scale for the 4 chord, the key of the song, major pentatonic scale for the 1 chord. And then the only other thing to know is when you go to the 5 chord, so the 5 chord would be a G in this case, you'd play the minor pentatonic scale of the 5 chord, so the G minor pentatonic scale. So really we're just staying in the key of the song except for the 5 chord. And then that 5 chord we're going to switch and play the minor pentatonic of the 5 chord. You don't have to do that. It's just one little formula that I like to use a lot because I think it just sounds so good. So just keep that in the back of your head as we go through this. So when I played this, that was my just setting it up with the 2 C7s, and then I went. This is C major pentatonic scale pattern 1. So right now we're in hand position on the fretboard. We're playing a C chord out of the G shape. Right? There's the top part of that G shape. Here's the bottom part. But I usually only play the top part. That's where I get most of. Actually, that's not true. Sometimes I'll play that little hammer on down there. But that's where we're at. And so the cool thing about this is your major pentatonic scale pattern 1 lives inside of your G shape. Maybe that's a light bulb for somebody. Maybe you haven't thought of that before, but just connect that in your mind. Okay, I got a C note here. I got a C note here. I got a chord here. I got a 7 chord here. And I've got my major pentatonic pattern 1 there. So as far as that lick, I'll put the tab up for exactly how I played it, but it's like some bends there on that 7th fret 3rd string. Then I played. So that's a full bend on that 7th fret 3rd string. And then strings 2 and 1 on the 5th fret. So it's, and then we go 8, 5, bend and release there. You can just check out the tab if you want it specifically, but that's where it's coming from. Major pentatonic scale pattern 1. And now the song goes to the 4 chord, which is F. And so what I did was I asked myself, since I was already fretting a note here, real quickly I go through in my mind, where's my nearest F to where I'm at? So I don't want to have to jump down here. I could do that, but what I did was I came to this F, which is my F chord using the C shape. Now I didn't play the full chord with all 4 fingers there. I just went like this and did a hammer on. So that's kind of the Keith Richards hammer on to the 4 chord, which you've heard me talk about. I'm doing a bar there, and I'm playing the strings 2, 3, and 4 from that 5th fret. But then while I keep that bar, I'm going to put my middle finger down on the 6th fret 2nd string, my ring finger on the 7th fret 4th string. And I did a hammer on like that. And I only played strings 4 and 2. Now after that, to blues it up, I came down to this note, 8th fret 3rd string with my pinky. And what is that note? It's your flat 7 for your F in this C shape. So that's my F chord using the C shape. You need to know where your flat 7s are in these, because when you want to play the blues, that flat 7 gives you everything you need. I mean, well, not everything you need, but it gives you a lot. It gives you a lot of mileage. So you just need to know where that is. I could also play that F7 like this, using that C7 shape. Think of your C7 in first position, play it up here. That's really what I was doing when I played that. Okay, so that's my 4 chord, right? My F chord. Now, what do we play for a scale? Remember, I said over the 4 chord, we were going to try and play our minor pentatonic scale for the key of the song. The song is in the key of C. I'd have to ask myself, where's my nearest C minor pentatonic scale to where I'm at here? Oh yeah, I've got one right here. That's my C minor pentatonic scale pattern 5. And this is just stuff you'll get under your fingers the more you do of this. So I remember I started with my C chord using the A shape, then we came up here to the C chord using the G shape. And in that G shape, I have my major pentatonic scale pattern 1. And I've got my minor pentatonic scale pattern 5 in the same area. So that's where this next lick comes from. And the way that I played it was like this. So there was that part of it there, 8th fret 2nd string, 6th fret 1st string. And then a little chromatic walk down, 8, 7, 6. Remember, you can always do those chromatic moves. If you've got 2 notes, you got a fret in between them, you can play that note. Just as a passing tone, you don't land on it, that's the key. So then I landed on this note. That's my C note. Remember we talked about that. I had a C here. In the A shape, I had a C here. And then in the G shape, I had a C here, and then one up here. So I'm just mentioning that because that was the note I landed on, was that C there. And I can now do some things once I get my bearings. So if I can picture in my mind, if I can visualize that C, I know I've got options here in this G shape. There's my C7 in the G shape. I've also got stuff I can do in the A shape, and that's what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go. I'm going to play a 6 to the 9 chord. That kind of jazzy sort of, you know, T-Bone Walker sounding blues thing that you hear. And I love this because I can so easily picture this off of this A shape. This is my C chord using the A shape, but look at that. I've got one finger on the 3rd fret, one finger on the 5th fret. Those are the 2 frets that give me the 6 and 9 chord. If I bar the first 3 strings on the 5th fret, I get a 6 chord. That'd be a C6. If I take that down 2 frets and bar the first 3 strings on the 3rd fret, I'm playing a C9. Now that's not a literal C9. That could be argued that's a G minor triad. That's not the point. If I'm playing this in context with a C underneath it, like in the jam track, this will make that C chord sound like a C9 because it's got enough notes from your C9 chord to color the sound like a C9. That always confuses people, and I have to always kind of come back to that point. That's just how it works. It depends on the chord underneath it or the context of how you're playing it that makes it sound sort of like a 6 chord or a 9 chord or a minor chord or whatever. I just love that because you can slide it around with one finger. It's so easy and it sounds great. Now you know how to find it off of your A shape. So now the song goes to the 5 chord, which is a G when we're playing in the key of C. And so that was the last thing we played. So then you ask yourself real quick, okay, where's my nearest G? Oh yeah, I've got a G right here using the E shape. And remember what I said about the formula, this blues phrasing formula? You play a major pentatonic scale over the 1 chord for the key of the song. You play the minor pentatonic scale over the 4 chord for the key of the song. And for the 5 chord, you play the minor pentatonic scale of the 5 chord. So not of the key of the song, but G minor pentatonic scale. And since I'm here off of this E shape, I can just play the G minor pentatonic scale pattern 1. And that's what I did. I just played a little bluesy lick right out of pattern 1 of my minor pentatonic scale. And then the song goes back to the 4 chord, which is our F chord. And since I just finished a lick here out of that G minor pentatonic scale, my nearest F to where I'm at is right here, using the D shape. Right? So here's my F chord using the E shape where my pinky is. That's my F note. I can put my index finger there, move it up. Now I'm playing out of the D shape. So that's my F chord out of the D shape. And if you'll remember from the D lesson, which I'll put up on the screen now if you want a refresher, but we've got our major chord and then we've got our 7, our dominant 7, our flat 7 sound from that flat 7. So that's what I hit just to kind of blues it up for the 4 chord. So I played it like this. That last note is my C note there, 5th fret, 3rd string. And then I tagged it with this little... And this is going across 2 different shapes. I'm coming up to minor pentatonic scale pattern 5, which is out of my G shape. And then I'm going to slide back down into pattern 4. So I slide with my ring finger, and the fingering is so important in this because it puts your hand in the right position. So I start with my ring finger, slide up to that 8th fret 2nd string. So I'm starting on the 6th fret 2nd string. And then I hit that C note up here, 8th fret 1st string. Just walk down that little box. And then slide back down to where I started. And then watch this. That's just walking right down the C minor pentatonic scale, pattern 4. So all I was doing, it may seem complicated, but all I'm really doing is I'm just following a very simple formula. I'm playing the C major pentatonic scale for the 1 chord. I'm playing the C minor pentatonic scale for the 4 chord. I'm going back to C major pentatonic scale for the 1 chord. I'm playing the G minor pentatonic scale for the 5 chord. And then I just go back to the C minor pentatonic scale to end the thing. Now, I could just play C minor pentatonic scale for all of it, and that would work too. Or I could play C major pentatonic scale for all of it because that is the key of the song. So just remember that. All of these little changes, like playing the minor pentatonic scale, the 5 chord, they're just little nuances to kind of boost your sound. So it just depends on what you're going for. But there's a lot of blues guys that would just stay in the minor pentatonic scale for the whole thing. And that, you can make that work too. It just depends on the sound you're going for. All right, I'm going to wrap up this part 1 video here. Now come join us for part 2 where we go into another set of, we're going to stay in the key of C, but we're going to go into another set of chord voicings out of the C.A.G.E.D system. So we're going to play a higher spot on the neck. I'll play a little bit of that at the end of this video so you can see what that sounds like. Leave a comment. Let me know if you like this. Let me know if there was any light bulbs in this or this was unclear or anything like that. I love the feedback because that's how I know if this is working. And so I really rely on that. So please let me know. All right, I'll see you in the part 2 video where we'll go over the second half.